Good morning and welcome to Rising. I am genuinely excited for our show today, as I am every day, of course.
What makes today particularly special?
No, I like the topics we're discussing. They're pretty good.
Okay.
And they are every day, to be abundantly clear. Today is not special.
Well, coming up to talk about some of those topics, I'll be discussing how Speaker Mike Johnson is stalling a newly elected Congresswoman swearing in and why even Thomas Massie is calling him out.
Plus, a Morning Joe panelist is calling on Democratic Virginia Attorney General candidate Jay Jones, whose text messages fantasized about violence being recently leaked, to drop out of that race.
And Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson is establishing what he calls an ice-free zone in the city. But first, Robby, what's on your radar?
Well, excited to talk about this one. Now, in the resignation letter announcing her departure from the Gray Lady in July of 2020, the opinion journalist Bari Weiss memorably lamented that, quote, Twitter is not on the masthead of the New York Times, but Twitter has become its ultimate editor. What Weiss meant was that the extremely progressive sensibilities of elite social media users, leftist activists, educators, journalists, Democratic campaign staffers, etc., held undue sway over the range of views that could be printed in the opinion pages. This was a constant source of frustration for Weiss, a centrist thinker critical of the left, whose mission was to bring some measure of ideological diversity to the paper. In her letter, she bragged about having published independent and contrarian writers, such as Jesse Singal, Glenn Lowry, Thomas Chatterton Williams, Nick Gillespie, and others. But in the summer of 2020, the collective set of ideologies, habits, and preferences commonly referred to as wokeness still ruled the roost. Now, much has changed in the last few years, and they are about to change even more noticeably at another large media company. That's because Bari Weiss is set to become the editor-in-chief of CBS News. Parent company Paramount has also purchased the Free Press, the media company that she built from scratch in the years since leaving the New York Times, for an eye-popping $150 million.
I'm going to continue to lead this incredible community alongside my tireless team, remaining CEO and editor-in-chief of the Free Press, and of course, hosting this show. But as of today, I'll be taking on another title too. I'm now editor-in-chief of CBS News, working with new colleagues on the programs that have impacted American culture for generations, shows like 60 Minutes and Sunday Morning, and also shaping how millions of Americans read, listen, watch, and most importantly, understand the news in the 21st century.
In other words, over the course of just 5 years, Weiss has gone from an underappreciated mid-level editor at a hostile to her newspaper to the boss of a major television news company, making millions in the process. One doesn't have to be in sympathy with Weiss's views in order to appreciate the staggering nature of this achievement. She has pulled off an elaborate Count of Monte Cristo-style revenge, if not over the Times itself, at least over the sort of people who made her experience at the Times so miserable. The misery in Weiss's telling was indeed thorough. She claims her colleagues bullied and badgered her for daring to solicit opinions that conflicted with their own, even though that was the job the Times had hired her to perform. This tension had culminated just 1 month prior to her resignation in a full-on staff revolt over an op-ed by Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas that called for the National Guard to be deployed to quell post-George Floyd rioting in U.S. cities. How interesting. Progressive staffers framed their opposition to that op-ed as a matter of workplace safety for them. They said this op-ed put the lives of black staffers at risk and constituted a form of violence. The argument they made was not, we question the wisdom of sending the Army into cities to conduct law enforcement, which would have been a fine argument. Their argument was, you should not be allowed to write this. In other words, wasn't an argument at all. Now again, back in 2020, that was par for the course. A phenomenon that previously remained confined to elite college campuses had spread throughout social media like a disease, infecting workplaces that disproportionately hired young, uber-progressive people. Hit the media industry particularly hard. The Times was not alone in having to reckon with junior employees suddenly making unreasonable demands for emotional safety. Now, Twitter may have served as the ultimate editor, in Weiss's telling, but actually Slack, the online communications platform used by many businesses, particularly media companies, was where the social media constructed opinions of woke youngsters took shape as internal enforcement mechanisms for groupthink. Now, since at least 2016, when Donald Trump made opposition to political correctness a central aspect of his presidential campaign, many libertarian, contrarian, and heterodox figures, including Weiss herself and including yours truly, have warned that the thing we now call wokeness would engender massive backlash. Weiss's elevation to the position of editor-in-chief of CBS News is, in some sense, one of the clearest indicators yet that wokeness in media, like wokeness everywhere else, is a loser. It's losing in the marketplace of ideas. It's losing in the actual, literal marketplace. Now Weiss isn't Trump or MAGA, to be clear, and though the mainstream media is already describing CBS News as facing a hostile takeover from a, quote, Trump-friendly journalist, the Free Press does run plenty of criticisms of Trump and his movement, particularly on foreign policy. Their sensibilities are actually far more neoconservative than MAGA's or than mine, and the publication's uncompromising support for Israel is a bit out of step with many of the right's more popular online figures these days, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, Joe Rogan, and others. Now, to its credit, the Free Press does regularly feature debates on this subject, including one between Coleman Hughes and Dave Smith just this week. Now, for her part, Weiss has announced no specific plans to radically rebrand or reformat CBS News. In a letter to all employees of the company, she outlined 10 core journalistic values that she thinks the company should exemplify under her leadership. They're all inoffensive and non-ideological. Even so, CBS News veterans are anonymously telling media reporters that they are, quote, encouraging Weiss not to interfere with 60 Minutes or CBS News Sunday Morning. Okay. Good luck with that, guys. It seems a little bit delusional on their parts to think she won't have a say in what goes on there. So this was some big news.
It was.
Yesterday, breaking as we were
on air.
and rising, yeah.
I was waiting for it to come down. We kind of talked about it, and I might have a bit of a contrarian view to a lot of people who think they know what I'm going to say, but I'm actually happy for her. I think more as a production company owner, as a free thinker, as somebody who understands that there are traditions that are in place and not spaces for people that create their own or question authority. A lot of times, you know, this is a great move for somebody in her position, and for her, like you said, you don't have to agree with everything she says
right.
to know that this is a huge accomplishment right. for somebody of her age and somebody of her mindset. And so there are plenty of things that I would say, oh, be critical on this and that, but there also are other people at CBS News that also report to Paramount and Skydance, like the president of CBS News, that'll still be in place, and you'll have parallel roles reporting to one, or no, not reporting to one another, conversing with one another on the same playing field and both reporting to the leaders of the company. So it's not like the buck stops with her, period,
right.
and no one else is at the table.
And it's not even clear
what adding another voice to
right,
the
and
table.
it's not even clear what that would mean, because she doesn't, in the publication she runs, the Free Press, she does not enforce a specific ideological line. What she does is curate interesting, sometimes contrarian opinions that they might clash with progressives, but she also caters to ones that do clash with Trump, again, particularly on foreign policy. So it's not like, I think some in the mainstream media are acting as if CBS has just brought in some hardcore Trump zealot to run their news organization to appease him. But like, that's not her at all. It doesn't, you have to be completely unfamiliar with who she is and the publication she built to think that's the case.
And I think the series of events at CBS and Paramount are raising alarm for some, rightfully so. They've raised alarms for me, not Bari Weiss specifically, but for example, when CBS hired Trump's former Japan ambassador to be the ombudsman, which is a fancy word for saying somebody who dictates whether the news is swaying one way or another, and you're hiring somebody who used to work for Trump to be the one to do that. That's not actually apolitical. That's a little weird, especially when you just sued the company and they, decided to go along with that lawsuit, pay you out so it can go to your presidential library. And so Bari Weiss to me is a separate thing, but people are culminating everything that's happened at CBS and Paramount over the last year and saying, this is an additional thing that we'll just raise our eyebrows at, because I don't think even Bari Weiss wants to see the coverage of CBS News just turn into like a Fox.
Right.
That's to me wildly inappropriate. What we should see is that there are more people who feel like they're less heard by these quote unquote mainstream outlets, garnering the attention that has been split and divided through social media, through podcasting. Like, a lot of that audience feels lost. She actually celebrates and has space for people that are young. She has events for people under 30. I think that audience
dating events, social, like go meet your future boyfriend or girlfriend at some of these events. And yes, to your point, in her branding for the Free Press, she says for people who want something different from the New York Times or from Fox News. That's explicitly in her branding. So the idea that she's going to turn it into another Fox, she hasn't done that with the media company that she started from scratch and built to a $150 million acquisition.
And you can't be the boss that you complained about. So if somebody comes to you with a contrarian point that's against what you believe on a certain stance, if she does the same thing to someone else, then we will find that there will be another Bari Weiss that'll leave her company and go start something better rather than coordinate.
What a lesson to what we used to call the woke people are just so.
I think this is more of a lesson to not
hang on.
embracing.
They chased her out of the New York Times, and woke people who think she's so evil. She is now set to run CBS because they chased her out of the New York Times. If you just let her, toil in relative obscurity as a mid-level editor of the New York Times, from the woke perspective, she would be doing far less damage to your cause. So it's kind of a lesson in unintended consequences. There's much more I could say on this subject, and maybe I'll have more to say on it later in this week. But for now, a crackdown on ICE from the mayor of Chicago up next, how he's attempting to stop the agency from operating on city property. Stay with us.